All right, guys, thanks for tuning in. So you are watching a video of us making a table. When I say us, me, myself, Tom, and Anthony sitting right next to me.
How's it going?
We are going to kind of walk you through the steps here of how we're building our tables here at Real Antique Wood. Hopefully you can build one at home. So you're going to see right here we're mixing and cutting the boards, right, Ant?
Yep. Yeah, big thing. Open up your bundles, go through, see if there's any imperfections that you maybe want to cut out, or some particular pieces that you really want to have highlighted in the center of the table. And then first and foremost, square up your ends. Make sure everything is nice and square.
Hey, so you can see Anthony here is teaching me how to mix the boards, make sure that they are appropriate for the size of the plywood.
That's it.
How to adhere them to the plywood. So that's a 3/4 inch piece of plywood right there with 3/4 inch. I think that was 4 or 5 inch flooring that we have on top of there.
4 inch on top, 1.25 brads in the pin nailer, and our beautiful Bona 851 adhesive. So here we are. This is our starter row. We're going to kind of butter it up like we're trying to clog our arteries here with a nice buttered roll.
Oh yeah, that definitely looks like margarine.
Yeah. So that's the starter row is obviously the most important piece. That's the beginning to your puzzle there. So we'll butter that up, and then we're going to flip that over. Make sure it's all nice and square on the plywood. So luckily it stays, you're able to move it. It has real good working time, the 851. Go ahead.
Oh, I was saying this first board here was kind of tough. I remember it's got to be lined up, and what you're doing right now is making sure, because most of the time we're hitting it in the tongue, but you're coming up from the bottom there.
Yeah. So for the starter, you can kind of, if you go back, we can kind of look. We started at one corner, so that's almost like our pivot. So we're able to kind of maneuver that board if we need to make any sort of adjustment. So that is exactly in line with the plywood. So we hit it on the outside, the groove side, and then we'll come back in and pop some pins in the actual tongue like you would any typical hardwood flooring.
Now I was surprised how much glue that we are using. Why do we use so much glue?
I mean, the big thing, the glue is our friend. We want to make sure. My big thing, I would rather put a little extra into it, material and time, build it right the first time. Especially on our end, we're doing these for customers and restaurants where they're gonna be put through. They'll be put through the ringer. They're gonna be mopped multiple times a day, cleaned, disinfectant, and a lot of environmental changes. So. We want to build it one time. They're only going to pay us to build it one time, so that's kind of where we go a little bit heavy with the glue. And again, it is wood. It is kiln dried, single-digit moisture content, but it will still move. It's still alive in some aspects. So
very important to kiln dry your material, right?
Absolutely.
This is almost worthless if you're using very wet wood.
For sure.
So now you were using the teeth on the trowel. I saw that.
Yep.
We wanted to make sure to spread the glue away from the board so you don't end up with a big kind of, I don't know what you want to call it, just a
big booger,
goop coming out from the board, from the second board. And now we're lining up. We're not really using too much discretion in terms of what boards we're putting next to each other, right? You don't want to think about that too much.
No, you definitely want to mix them up. A lot of times, you may have a couple pieces from the same board that came off the barn, so you definitely want to shuffle the deck as you would with any even new pre-finished flooring. You want that nice random look. You don't want it to look like a candy striped gum wrapper,
Right.
So You definitely want that random pattern.
And how many nails are you just putting in there?
I mean, it all depends on the length of the board. These are about 30 inches long. Anywhere from 10 nails, maybe a little bit more. It all depends on the board. Sometimes it might have a split, and definitely what we're showing right now is a good little trick that I had learned from Gary way back in the day. A good flat bladed screwdriver. If the board maybe has a slight little twist or some overwood, some underwood, things don't line up perfectly, start it, put a couple pins at the one end, close that gap with that flat blade screwdriver. You can drive that down into the substrate. You don't want to drive it all the way through.
Yeah, you're giving it a light tap.
Just a light tap just to get a good bite on it. Give it a little pry, hit it with a few pins, and that board is locked down, good to go.
And then the mallet doesn't hurt either, right?
No, definitely to use the rubber end. You don't want to be beating on the tongue with the steel end. That's only if you're for driving a screwdriver.
Gotcha.
So here we go, Tom. Now you're getting a good feel for it.
Oh yeah, that's what most of this stuff is. It's and I don't know if I said this in the beginning, but I've really never done this before. I've watched Gary and Anthony do it. Maybe I have put a board to a piece of plywood, but I've never really built a table before, as I'm doing here. And by the third or fourth board, it's kind of easy. So if you're doing it at home, I don't know, maybe you have a small piece that you're practicing on, but after you do it a couple times, no problem.
Practice makes perfect.
That's right. Okay, what are we doing right here? We're flipping the table over now.
Yep.
I know that we're basically doing what we did to the first board, to the last board, right?
Exactly. So we're coming in about a half inch in from the edge of the plywood, just so that you don't see all the the heads of the nails. We'll flip it back over. As you can see, you're putting a little bit of downward pressure to make sure that you have good adhesion between the substrate and the plywood. We're going to lock it down with a couple more pins, and we'll let that set up for a little while.
And that takes, I know this is a time-lapse video, but we did that in like 10 to 15 minutes. It's not super labor-intensive, that part of the process. And then this is really...
This is where the labor is.
This is where the labor is. And this is the tricky part. This is awesome. I think that this really, what we do here makes us different than a lot of companies. It's also going to give you a different look if you're doing this at home. And this is a hand scraper. And who is this? What is this hand scraper that we're using here?
I mean, this scraper here is made by Hardwood Industry Products. We're introduced to them through the NWFA at one of the conventions a few years back. Got in touch with them. Their products are unbelievable. They have that blade on there is tool steel. We can resharpen them. It has a nice radius to it, so we're not actually digging the shoulders of that scraper blade into the boards, which definitely gives it that very unique, nice, smooth hand scrape, a little bit of undulation in the finish, if that's the proper word, without scarring up too much.
Yep. And then we're just giving it a light sand here. So basically getting rid of any kind of splintery pieces and making it nice and even.
Exactly.
And the scraper too, same thing. After you've done it a couple times, you get the hang of it. It's no problem. It's just you're holding it at a kind of an angle when you're hitting all corners, making it nice and pillowed.
That's it. So I mean, the big thing with that, you can't always sand it flat. We like to keep it a little bit more authentic, a little bit more of an old world feel. Exactly, old school.
And now here we're maybe you guys don't have a table saw at home like this. This is a monster. This is actually a very scary machine, but you can do it with other saws at home, right?
Yeah, I mean, you could do just with a regular circular saw and a straight edge. You can even do it with a router with a flush trim bit. That works very well too.
You hear how much I know, right? I don't even know what those other saws are called, but yeah, those things that you probably have at home. And we're just trimming up the boards here to. We were doing it to fit the plywood. Now what we're doing here is actually something kind of interesting. You guys want to pay attention. I'm going to let you explain this, Ant.
Yep, so what we're doing here is just ripping down some of the extra pieces of the flooring that we had left over. And I'm sure everybody's wondering, what are you going to do about the ugly side of that table where you see the plywood? On the long sides, these are going to be just our little trim pieces that are going to cover the actual... the hardwood mix, which was used for the tabletop itself, and also the plywood. So we're going to rip them down to about 1/2 inch. These will be glued and nailed as well on the long edges of the boards. And that is pretty much it. It gives it a nice finished look and holds up very, very well from our experiences.
And we're using a piece of floor and we're getting rid of the relief cuts right here, right?
Yeah, that is correct, yes.
So we're just doing it's going to be maybe about a 1/2 inch or what, a little over, somewhere between 1/4 inch and a 1/2 inch when we're done?
Yeah, it's right about a 1/2 inch in thickness.
Just getting the right size here.
Exactly. So now we're going to trim them up. Beautiful Festool Capex. Wonderful machine there.
Oh, yeah. I was surprised that, because you see these finished products once they're done, and you would never know that you used a piece of flooring as a trim on that table.
Yep.
You're going to see here, this was actually kind of a difficult part, just because you want to make sure that it's lined up, and you want to make sure that the top of your tabletop is level with that border. could be hanging over on the bottom, right?
Yep, exactly. We have a trick for that, which we can touch on after the fact. Most importantly, we want to try and keep, for this particular instance, we want to keep that original face as original as possible, not, overwork it with the sander and scrape it and try and disturb that too much, that patina. So we'll definitely keep that nice and flush there.
Now here, I know that you're showing me how important it is to keep that level, and
yep.
You got to insert the nails at the right spot so you're not hanging on the other end as you're inserting them. Here I'm just giving this a nice little, very little.
Nice little bead of glue.
bead of glue. Guys, there's no reason to be shy with the glue either. Right? And
no, there's no reason. Especially a white glue like this. It's just a PVA. It cleans up with warm water and some soap. I mean, it's nothing. It's not like a urethane-based glue where it's going to make a huge mess on you. And the same goes for the glue that we had used to adhere the flooring to the substrate. That's a silane-based glue. There are some other companies out there that are urethane-based, which are exceptional products as well, but.
And what would happen if it was a urethane base? Just curious.
It's just, from experience, and it's extremely strong, but it's like, you get that little bit on your fingertip, and then before you know it, it's in your ear, it's on your face, it's stuck to your car seat on the way home. It just makes and it's very difficult to clean off your hands. You got mineral spirits or something that is, obviously not really recommended.
Gotcha.
So a big pointer here, as you can see, I'm pointing out, we are using 18 gauge pin nail. If it does hit a knot or the grain is a little wonky, it does run a chance of shooting out the face of that board. So I just want to make sure that Tom's fingers were clear of that.
Yes. Easy mistake to make. I think I've almost did it about 3 times as I was going down there the first round. But you see, so we're doing it about a 1/4 inch down from the top and about a 1/4 inch up from the bottom. So we're securing the trim to the tabletop or the flooring portion, and then also the substrate, which is the plywood portion.
Exactly. Go round 2.
Yep. And again, this, it took me a little bit longer because I was moving a little bit slower, but I don't know, you probably
towards the end you were rocking.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, big, very, very interesting stuff here. Wood, flour, cement.
Yep.
What are we using this for?
So this is obviously made by a company, Glitzer. It's been around a very, very long time. It is a 1-part epoxy that we use to fill our larger voids, splits, checks, cracks, nail holes, so on and so forth. The beautiful part of it, you can take some of the sawdust from whatever it is that you're working with, and the filler will take on the color of the wood. So you can see here we're really working it down into that knot. We want to preserve the character of this, these are historical timbers, old barns and things like that.
And what are you doing here, banging it down?
Yeah, so just kind of getting it down to settle down into the cracks, just dropping any air bubbles. Again, really trying to work it down into the material so there's good adhesion.
It looks like peanut butter.
Yeah, you want it to be about the consistency of peanut butter.
Okay.
So, depending upon what you're filling, and you can always use a little bit more coarse dust if you have a real large void and you want it to have a little bit of dimension to it. You can use almost wood shavings. You've made like a real fine putty. It's almost like melted butter, real fine dust, out of the dust collection.
Now, what is this? Just stuff that came off of the table saw?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Now, do we want to be? You're not being too shy with this stuff. Looks like you're filling it up pretty well.
Yeah, you can definitely apply it real liberally. I usually like to glob it on relatively heavy, come back like a half hour, 45 minutes later, scrape the excess off that hasn't really started to set up. It does take a little bit longer than most wood fillers to dry. But it does hold up unbelievably, and it's beautiful stuff.
And what you'll see later is it dries really well. It looks very natural with the rest of the product.
Yep.
So we were just cutting our breadboards there. You saw that real quick. Now, going back to what we said before, you wanted the top portion level, right?
Exactly.
Because you're going to come across the bottom, and what are we doing here?
So we have just a little Bosch, little 1 horsepower router with a flush trim bit. We always, just a little trim pieces, leave them a little proud, especially because there are inconsistencies in the thickness of the material for the top. So again, we can always come back and trim this off after. What I like to do is take little bites with it. Being reclaimed wood, it is thin, and the grain is sometimes a little bit crazy. So
you got some knots in there.
Exactly. I have little knots, and you don't want to have a splinter that's going to run away on you. So we'll do a little 1.5 inch, 2 inch bites out of it, as you can see there with that chip. If the grain was just right, it could have continued to split. So most importantly, let the router do the work. Do not force it. always work into the rotation of the router bit. If you went back a couple seconds, you could see I was showing Tom there that what happens if you if you go with the router bit, it's going to want to run away from you.
And what kind of router bit are we using here on this?
It's actually a 3-fluted flush trim bit. Home Depot, Lowe's, you can get them just about anywhere. I want to say that was a Diablo bit there, so
nice.
Excellent stuff.
Cool. And here, if you guys had seen our earlier videos, we do use Dominoes.
Big time.
Okay, we're attaching our breadboard to our tabletop, and we are using Festool Domino. And what are you doing right here?
So we just have just making our mortise in the breadboard. Now we're in the tabletop. We will split the difference between the substrate and the actual material. So
we're going right into the plywood and the flooring.
Exactly. We're using what the second largest domino they make. It's 12 millimeters in thickness, so it's almost half the thickness of the overall tabletop. Plus, we have good adhesion with the the bone glue that we used in between, and we're using the 100 millimeter long dominoes. So we're going in. We're getting a lot of good surface area. It's very, very strong, and we've had great luck with these.
Now I know that maybe again a lot of people don't have this at home. I don't know if you can rent them at Home Depot. I'm not really sure. You go out and buy one. I don't know how much that is, but I will tell you this. I did have Anthony with me, who's done thousands of these tables, but it was way easier than I thought it was going to be to use that machine and fit these pegs into these mortise holes.
Yep.
Very, very simple. I'm sure that there are other settings that will make it tighter.
Yep.
But we had it on, what type of setting did you?
So they have again, like you said, the two settings. The one is very, very tight. You actually have to take a mallet and drive in the domino. That has a little bit more of a loose setting. It makes the mortise hole 2 millimeters bigger, just to give you a little bit of wiggle room in case there's any sort of misalignment or anything like that.
Okay.
Going that route, it also gives you a nice glue area. Good surface coverage with the glue as well, with the little bit larger setting.
Yep.
So.
And we were using a mallet. I probably, if I really want to do that with my hands and I had the proper security on that table, I probably could have done it that way. I mean,
Absolutely.
it fit that easily.
Just snug enough.
Yep. Yep. Okay, what are we doing here?
So,
Clamps.
Yep, here we have
Very
just
important
a
part.
regular bar clamps. You want to make sure our breadboards are nice and flush on one side. We will come back in after the fact and clean up the side that is a little bit proud. So again, with the bar clamps, we definitely want to stagger. Bar clamps tend to bow a little bit, and you definitely want to evenly, disperse that pressure, top and bottom.
How long did we keep it clamped for?
About 6 hours.
Nice.
So we have full tack. The glue sets up pretty quick.
And everybody's favorite part right here.
The finish when it comes to life.
The finish. I mean, this table looked awesome before, and now that we're putting this Osmo, is this the thin coat 1100?
This is the extra thin they call it. It has just a little bit less wax. Their recommendation is for the first coat, and then come back in with the Poly-X, which we will, as everybody will see shortly. So it's able to be brushed on. You don't have to overwork it. As you can see, it gets beautiful coverage. A little bit goes a very long way. I mean, we're just using a very simple, just a BS chip brush. It's nothing fancy here.
And when you are if you're working with reclaimed wood, you do have to work it a little bit because you're going to get spots that are going to soak it up. You're going to get spots where maybe it's not perfectly even and it might pool a little bit. So just keep an eye out for that. Make sure that, and you kind of see that's what I'm doing here. I'm going back over, making sure Anthony's picking out all the spots where that I'm not picking up on, where it's pooled or where it's kind of dry and it needs a little bit more.
Yep. So, I mean, the key with the Osmo, too, which after talking with our rep and also just from experiences using it here in the shop for the past couple months, you do not need a lot. The key is to apply it very thin, wipe off the excess. It is a oil wax, as you can see Tom is doing here.
5 minutes, right?
Yeah.
We pretty much coated it and then
a couple minutes later, here we are.
Almost right away. All right, guys. Hey, well, that was pretty much that for the video. We appreciate you guys tuning in. We will have pictures of that table on our Instagram and our Facebook, so please keep an eye out for it. We did put a final coat of Osmo Poly-X wax oil on there. So stay tuned, guys. Thank you for tuning in, and we will see you soon.
Thank you.